Hi, and welcome to another edition of Newsmakers Journal of the Vaccine Year. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Wednesday, August 4th. We have a special press clips edition today, and I'm very pleased to welcome the deputy editor of the Montecito Journal, Nick Masuda, who many of you may know. Nick's done journalism here in Santa Barbara for a number of years, and also elsewhere. We're going to talk a lot about that. Nick, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. This is fantastic. It's great to be back home and be in a community that I love and adore.
All right, well, let's get right to it. You just pushed the button as we were talking before to send the paper to the press. I mean, you literally just closed I guess this week's edition. You come out tomorrow. What's on the cover?
So we actually, the real estate market has been absolutely insane, along the South Coast, but specifically Montecito has been out of this world. And so we actually have a 6-month recap of 2021, looking at that in a 64-page special section that's being inserted into the 48-pager that normally comes out every week. So we've got 112 pages for people this week, and a lot of it's focused on real estate. So that's our cover. We got some other great stuff in terms of a local business called Solid Foundations that's really used a grant from Montecito Bank and Trust to help build its business. There's some new electric bike stuff coming in on Coast Village Road. And so we've got a lot of really interesting content in there. Trip up to San Ynez and why it was really good for the soul for our writer. And it's really cool to be back in an area that seems to have been able to find a way to continue to exist in our environment. And
when did you return? When did you start working at the Journal?
Late May. So we made the decision to come back to town in early May and made our second cross country voyage in the matter of 12 months in late May. Yeah. We're a bit nuts. So,
talk a little bit about what your job is, what it entails. The deputy editor, I know you've been on the animal beat. You've written about rattlesnakes, whales, and leopards in the last just couple of weeks yourself, but you also do editing. Talk about what your job is.
Sure. So, my biggest, my week in and week out job, and I get to write as kind of a bonus, but my week in, week out is organizing both the Montecito Journal and the Santa Barbara Sentinel, which we launched last month, and we'd had our second issue come out this last weekend. And so really organizing those things, working with our army of freelancers that help us put out that product every day, and each has a very unique take on our community. And then working with
that's very diplomatic of you. That's one way of putting it. Yes.
And working with our production team and really making sure that our flow is really good and that things are well edited. Got a fantastic copy editor and Lily and doing a bunch of just really diving into the community. And what my role, I think, as bringing me on with Gwen and Tim bringing me here as a deputy editor is really to continue to dive deeper into issues and both positive and negative and things, making sure that we're really reflective of the Montecito community, which we feel that we serve quite well, but also diving in with the Sentinel. And also Coast Village Road is still very much under the city council's purview, and so really making sure that we stay very close to that and make sure that our small businesses are well taken care of. That's obviously key to our success, but also key to this community's success. So as a deputy editor, just make sure that we're hitting the right things at the right time. And then I, as you mentioned, I've got a soft place in my heart for animals, and that really grew from my last go around here in Santa Barbara and getting close to the zoo and going out into the wild with a California condor and seeing them in their natural habitat and spending hours out there and being as close as me to this computer screen from them and them being as inquisitive about me as I am about them. And animals have just really become an important part of what I do. But education and medical also over the last 2 years have become a big thing for me. I've got a senior in high school. And so I think that I've learned a lot as a parent in terms of different things as a journalist that I could do to make sure that education is taken care of. And then we've got this amazing medical community here that has not necessarily grown out of nowhere, but has taken on new prominence, countrywide, not just here, but countrywide.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about the paper. Gwen's been on a number of times, and beginning when she led the group that bought the paper, and very obviously ambitious aspirations for the paper about what it's going to do. Uh, Talk about the Sentinel a little bit. Where that's positioned vis-a-vis the Independent and other publications online or in print. What are you trying to do with the Sentinel now?
Even our first issue, I think it became pretty apparent that we're really trying to take care of the pulse of Santa Barbara in terms of growth specifically. We're really heavy into supporting small business and really thinking about the issues that affect them and impact them, and so really diving deep into that and making sure that as progress is being made, holding those accountable, that we need to make sure that that's maintained. That's going to become part of our role, is to make sure that we're locating that voice, that we're giving a voice to the voiceless, and to make sure that we're really attacking things. And what's really cool we did in that first issue, and now we'll continue moving forward, is something called the Burrows. And so what we really feel is that there's a lot of underserved neighborhoods throughout Santa Barbara, that a lot of the coverage that comes from most media comes from the downtown corridor, which is natural and nothing wrong with that, and actually is super impactful. But we feel like that San Roque and the Mesa and West Side and East Side, and we actually have 7 of them. We thought it was super important to make sure that we dedicate at least a page to these neighborhoods every single month. And if not, actually, there's going to be times where we have multiple pages, and we're actually already for that. So that it's not just about State Street. State Street's obviously incredibly important to what we're going to be doing, but we have to make sure that the businesses and the communities that are elsewhere, that we're reflecting what they go through, the really unique personalities that are there. Maybe it's a really cool business that is growing. Maybe it's an entrepreneur that's relocated here, that's living there, that we catch up with. So really wanted to make sure that we dive a bit deeper into what makes Santa Barbara very unique. And that's the community, that's the people that live here. It's not necessarily about me or any reporter. It's about making sure that we're listening to the right people.
And are you doing that all with freelance as well?
Yeah, so actually, well, yes, mostly I'm heavily involved with writing a lot of that content, but yeah, Zach Rosen is a main contributor of ours, and then a host of other freelancers that we're utilizing to really, those who understand some of these communities even better than I can. Ted Mills has been with the Santa Barbara Sentinel for a long time, has worked for other publications in town too. He was really close to that arts community, so he's helping there. And Stephen Leibowitz is doing both the Journal and the Sentinel, and so we're utilizing some of the same talents that we have with both products.
Yeah. One of the things that's really changed, just from watching it from the outside of the Journal, is it really does take on some tougher issues that probably would not have done, I don't know, a couple of years ago. And I'm thinking particularly of what's been going on at Cate School, or going on about Cate School. And you had a long piece about that a couple of weeks ago. Can you talk a little bit about that story?
Sure. No, it was one thing that, again, kind of going back to that parental, what would I want to know as a parent? What would I need to know before I sent my kid off to a private boarding school? And there was a couple of sources that came to me, a couple of survivors that I happened to reach out to. They reached out, and we ended up building a relationship over a couple of weeks and really talking about the issue at hand and what they had experienced. And any time in situations like this, there's a lot of he said, she said, and in this case, there was paper trail. There were things that had been done over time that were pretty
And let's
glaring.
be clear, we're talking about abused kids, right?
Yes, we
And
are, and
students,
it's
yeah.
not just today. Obviously the sheriff's department is looking into an issue from 2019, 2020, but we're talking about 3 or 4 decades ago. And so really thinking about how that has transpired over time really became interesting, but very necessary too. That Cate's a very important school in all of our communities. They produce some amazing kids, and UCSB has actually inherited a lot of these kids, including athletes. And so to dive deep in terms of what's the culture like at Cate, it wasn't necessarily about the breaking news of a student, of a teacher being investigated. It was more like, well, what's the culture like up there? What can we find out about that really, it moves the story forward. And we're not interested in being, one thing that we talk about a lot here is that we're not interested in being first. And with our weekly product, it's hard to be first, but we can be the best, or at least attempt to be the best. And I think that actually it helps all of us in town that do journalism. It helps us all continue to push forward. It might be a slightly competitive, but we're all pushing each other in so many ways. And I think that helps the community more. And specifically at Kate, I believe that this will help. There's been some movement already. And I do believe that once the double investigations are over, I think that there will likely be more movement. I think that'll be a necessary change.
Yeah. What, I mean, you raise an interesting point about competition or not, but I mean, you and I worked together back at the turn of the century, I think in the aughts. It was the early aughts. And at that time, the morning paper had 65 people in the newsroom. I mean, there's not half that many people, I think, now working all together, whether it's the Independent, Newshawk, Montecito Journal, of course, the vast staff here at Newsmakers. But, and you came into the industry. I mean, I was lucky in a way because I got to spend 25 years in print and in newspaper, and that's what the business was. And you came in at a time when, obviously the internet was transforming everything, but then the recession came and knocked out a lot of advertising, and how many tens of thousands of journalism jobs have been lost. Talk about what the kind of what the market looked like here in terms of coverage and in terms of opportunities for journalism when you started out, and what it is now and how that's changed. And is there any way to make up for the loss of all those positions, I guess?
Sure. I think it's interesting. I go back to, so I worked at the News Press, starting in 1997 as a freshman in college. And by my sophomore year, I was working full time because there just happened to be the first opening in more than 20 years in the sports department. And Mark Patton took a chance on me, and initially was splitting the job with Leah Etling. Then she decided to go off to grad school, and I inherited a full-time job. And I remember calling my grandparents and saying, "Hey, listen, my grades are probably going to slip." My grandparents raised me and I said, I'm going to be okay with B's now because I got a full-time job and really what my education needs to be. And, I had known since I was 15 that I wanted to do this. And so it was this really interesting and enter a market where there were 7 people on the sports staff and we were competing for assignments. We were competing to go out to a football game. We were trying to write the best stories. So the next week we would get assigned to the best game of the week. And that was it was great for a young journalist to be able to have that competition, but also nights where I wasn't going out. It wasn't necessarily a penalty. It was just more like, hey, you got to stay here and work the desk. You got to copy it. You got to design. You got to make sure things get out on time. And they gave me a real appreciation for the production cycle, which actually led to design work on my end, and also allowed me to not be on the road as much with now somebody, my wife, soon to be wife. She liked to see me, so that was always a good thing. So it was really interesting, the market. I felt like there was a lot of competition. I felt like every publication had somebody you wanted to beat on a story. You wanted to make sure you had the source. And I think that what I saw, I left in 01 and came back in 04. I started to see it somewhat going backwards in 04, where there wasn't quite as much competition out there, at least from my perspective. And while we were still doing really cool stuff, it didn't feel like I had the same push from the journalism community at large. I felt like it was starting to show some.
Well, the Santa Maria paper by then had started cutbacks. Certainly Lompoc had really been cut back a lot by then. So at least locally. And then the internet was really kind of in its infancy, still for news. And then that
For sure
blew up.
The internet was so important because that's the one thing that I had to challenge myself to learn. Not necessarily because I didn't grow up with it. I knew it, but how do you communicate? How do you make sure that what goes on the website and what needs to stick in print? And I think actually that was a big thing for me that I had to learn over the years in terms of thinking about audience and thinking about where people are and what they need to be fed and in what time. And something that actually very much intrigued me about what the journal has done in terms of respecting the print side of it and using digital as a support system. Doesn't mean
that's kind of a weird model, and I have to say I'm not completely crazy about it. But really, the journal really does put print first. You come out on Thursdays, and then the stories from that paper don't go online until when?
Till the next Wednesday. So we basically give it a 6-day cycle.
And is that primarily a business calculation that you don't want to, that you're cannibalizing advertising, or what? Explain why you do that.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Is, that's, we really believe that our print product does, those who advertise, we really do believe that our product helps them. And so to not cannibalize what we do there, and also to make it a must read and a must pick up, we really feel like we need to stick to that. Now, there's breaking news, things that are very timely. We do make that on a case by case basis, where we'll put something up online, even if it's short. But so we were there, and we have more and more of those discussions now, in terms of if there's something that is competitive and we do have it first, or we're at least in that realm, we'll have that discussion. But we really do believe that, when I walk around town and see people holding the paper, we feel like there's a ton of value in that. And it's a model that has worked for this publication for years and continues to work. And we really believe in supporting the local business as much as we can.
And what's the press run of the Montecito Journal now?
We range all the way up to 15,000, which is still a really significant number, especially for a smaller community like Montecito. So it's significant.
Yeah. And during the pandemic, or at least the early part of the pandemic, there was home delivery of the paper. Is that still going on?
Yeah, we do a handful of that. I don't think we're doing as much, but like this real estate issue that we're putting out this week, I do know that we're going to be delivering it to everybody in the 93108 zip code. And so there are situations where we definitely do the home delivery. But for the most part, we're predominantly pick up on news racks.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your own journey professionally. And I would say, I've watched Josh Molina up close, and I've kind of watched you from afar, and you were both in the same situation of being young guys who are just passionate about journalism, and all of a sudden the whole thing explodes. And anybody who wants to get a sense of what it's like to try to hustle and keep up and prevail in this market, I take a look at Nick Masuda's resume, because you've had not only jobs in a number of states, Florida, New Jersey, Maine, and so on, but have done a lot of different things. You mentioned earlier the design that you learned in production, but you've had to learn the web and photography and all kinds of storytelling, and that's where journalism is now. You have to do it on multi-platforms in different kinds of media. What's that been like to learn that?
Yeah. So something my grandfather told me, I think I probably was like 12 or 13 years old, and I'd actually been working with him, working full time. No shock that we were doing work on weekends and whatever. But he told me that you can't control if somebody's smarter, but you can control if you can outwork them. And that's something that really held true to me, is that I'm going to learn every skill set I possibly can. And if I am a B plus in all of it, that's going to make me an A as somebody who's attractive to a potential employer. Or more importantly, it's going to allow me to serve the communities as well as I possibly can. And thankfully, I've had a lot of different people along the way that have invested time in me that's maybe better than a B plus, and allowed me to grow in different ways. And so, yeah, I went from Santa Barbara, went back home up to San Jose, and then went out to, my wife's from Brazil. I'm from California. We decided to take a venture into Maine, which -20 hit us that one winter. And that was a lot. But at the same time, it was a lot of fun. We learned a lot. Prior to all of this, I actually followed her out to NYU, and I worked in New Jersey for a while. Came back to Santa Barbara. And then we actually ended up in Florida, where I worked for 12 years, but a number of different types of jobs. There I started out
for the Orlando Sentinel, among
Yeah,
other things.
yeah,
And,
Orlando Sentinel is where I started, and worked as a senior production designer. Eventually became the night news editor, just somebody who saw some potential in me to run the newsroom 2 or 3 nights a week, and was very fortunate with that. And eventually realized that I needed to jump into digital everything 100%, and jumped over to Golf Week magazine and took a product that was actually about to get shut down and took it into one that was making about $2.8 million a year, and saw traffic go from about 20,000 uniques a month to about 1 million.
that was all
And
online.
all online. So, that's where we were competing to be first and also best. And so we found a way to find that. Golf.com and Golf Digest and others were primary competitors, Golf Channel. and just be in a really interesting competitive environment, and choosing to again, we had the best writers in the room, but we weren't necessarily aligning them in the right way to make sure that we were having success. And we found that very quickly. After 18 months, we actually started seeing that money roll in, and I was able to add to the staff, and it was quite cool. And actually, eventually, we built it to the point where USA Today bought it, and so that was cool.
Was that revenue primarily advertising or subscription?
No, that was all advertising.
All
We actually were free. We made that decision to be free online, even though our print product was premier. We did go free online, even though there were definitely a lot of discussions inside about that. But we decided to chase the advertising model, and thankfully for the 5 years I was there, it worked. And seems like it's continuing to work. They're making quite a bit of money at USA Today about it with it.
And you work for the Orlando Magic also?
I did. So I finally kind of jumped to the other side and went into the marketing side, and really thought, you know what, I need to learn more about audiences. I always just want to learn as much as I can about audiences. And so for a year, literally no days off, worked for a year with the Magic, and just saw us grow tremendously with the social media footprint. And actually, even though the team sucked, and
Sucked, yes, I was going to say.
horrible, #2 website in the NBA. So we just found different ways to make sure we were entertaining audiences. Since our team wasn't winning, how do we make sure that that the players who have great personality, we put that at the forefront? And
Was that before or after Dwight Howard?
it was right after, and so there was still a lot of hate in the room too, that Dwight was gone, and but a lot of really cool guys on the team, and it was a lot of fun to work with them. Management at the time was a little conservative about doing things on social, but as soon as we started showing that we can monetize this, fans are engaging, people have been dormant for 2, 3, 4 years, they're now back to thinking the Magic are cool. That kind of won people over, and then kind of the reins were let loose, and we had a lot of fun.
So do you work, how much do you work with on the journal's website?
Primarily changing all the content out, once or twice a day if I can. And then, so try to keep that as fresh as we can, 7 days a week, and spreading things out. And so we're starting that again. I think that with all the brains in the room, we'll continue to evolve how we look at digital, some new ideas that we potentially might chase. But, I think again, it's been cool to work with a site that I feel like I've got a bevy of content that I can make, the website look fresh. And still, the way we write content for the most part is evergreen. So it allows us to be relevant no matter when we make that switch.
Are you able to see what people are reading in real time and change it out according to that?
Yeah, I monitor probably 2 or 3 times a day. At other jobs, that was actually probably more like 40, 50, 60 times a day. Like at Golf Week, we would do it to the second. Hey, listen, this one's not working as well as we thought. Let's get this switched out. Here, there's less importance to that, but I do monitor the traffic to make sure that we had things in the right place. Also seeing a story, hey, listen, I didn't even feature that, and it's showing up on our top. Where is that coming from, and how can I potentially amplify that? I think I'm a little bit more strategic about things now, to monitor in real time versus being necessarily, we're not a breaking news engine. We're more of a very topical, 30,000 foot level.
Hey, tell me, what is the Montecito Journal's intention about covering the mayor's race and the city council races? You going to have somebody on that full time, or what's the plan?
Yeah, I think you're looking at them. I think that, obviously there'll be others involved too, but I think that's going to be a primary focus of mine. That all of city council and all the races, the mayor's race, it really impacts Coast Village Road. And also now with the Sentinel being relaunched, it obviously impacts everything we do in Santa Barbara. So I think it makes a lot of sense for us to do that. I know you and Gwen have talked about potentially doing a town hall, which I think that we're still very much considering doing. And I think that there could be a lot of fun things we can do with that. I think that there's some really interesting races now. I didn't expect anybody to jump in against Megan. Obviously, Nina did. That was actually quite surprising to me. Obviously the mayor's race is going to be very interesting. I think Kristen's race with Barrett here, obviously care a lot about that in Montecito. That'll be very interesting. So I think there's a lot of interest that goes across town lines that make it very important for us to stay at the forefront of that coverage.
Yeah, whether I'm involved or not, I look forward to that forum. The Montecito Journal had really I think the most impactful forum in the supervisors race between Dawson and Laura. It was a great event, and I mean, they really did it. They really did it right. All right. Well, real quick, I think the last time we saw each other was at the Foresters game, the first game of the season, and that
Yeah.
they won that game, but they kind of didn't look so great for a while. But now, what are they up to? 13, 14 in a row, and they're headed to Wichita again, right?
Yeah, they're, it's typical Bill Pintard. Uh, when, there's sometimes early in the summer, he doesn't have all of his guys. Obviously some of them are playing the College World Series, and that's the type of high class player that he gets. So you always kind of feel like they're gonna go on a run at some point, and they seem to be peaking at the right time. Their pitching has definitely come back around, and they're starting to hit the ball pretty well. One thing I noticed this season, they won a lot of very low scoring games. Which means that pitching is going to hold up really well in Wichita, where the ball can fly. So that could be, they could be chasing another national title here, and I think that'd be great for this community to. I think last year kind of got lost in the pandemic shuffle.
Yeah.
For them to return this year with another one, I think that'd be pretty special. Bill does an incredible job with that team out there, and to see crowds back the way they were this season. It was really nice to see that. It was just nice for people to have someplace to go, really family friendly. That team does it right. And it's nice to have them downtown. Hopefully we can
it's a great asset for the town.
It is. Hopefully Pershing Park can be improved a little bit moving forward, but maybe that's part of what we need to bring up during these mayoral and city council races, because
key issue, I think. Yeah. And real quick, what's a prediction on the National League West?
Oh, wow. You know what? I have been absolutely shocked on what the Giants have done this season, and I feel like they've got the golden slipper on right now, and I don't see them losing that. And I think the Dodgers are gonna be tough come playoff time because of the pitching staff, but I think for some reason the Giants are just riding this wave, and it's been quite impressive. I thought at some point they were going to fall off, but
Pennant race doesn't start till September, so we'll see what happens. And what about Russ Westbrook to the Lakers? You like that or not?
I think that Westbrook and Anthony to the Lakers was a mistake. I think they got older instead of younger, and I think they needed to get younger.
They gave up defense. I mean, they gave up a lot of defense.
And LeBron's not what he was defensively, and so I think that they're going to struggle there quite a bit.
Yeah. All right. Well, you heard it. You heard it from the horse's mouth. There, Lakers are going to struggle. Hey, Nick Masuda, thanks so much for taking the time to come and talk with us. The deputy editor of Montecito Journal. It's great to have you back in town, and I know you bring a lot of energy. I can attest to that, to the job, and a lot of passion as well. So thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.